Lydia didn't know that the man watching her fumble with her coffee order was the most powerful alpha in the Western Territories. She didn't know that he'd been searching for his mate for over a century. And she certainly didn't know that her whispered phone conversation about needing a wedding date was about to change everything. The wedding invitation sat crumpled in her purse like a physical weight against her ribs. "Marcus and Bethany cordially request your presence." The words had burned themselves into her memory 3 days ago when she'd opened the pristine white envelope. Her ex-boyfriend was marrying the woman he'd left her for, and somehow, impossibly, they'd invited her to watch. "Because we want to show there are no hard feelings," Marcus had said when she'd called him, her voice shaking with disbelief. "Bethany thought it would be mature of us." Mature. As if there was anything mature about inviting your ex-girlfriend to watch you marry the woman you described as everything Lydia isn't. Now she stood in line at the small coffee shop near her apartment, practicing conversations in her head. What would she tell people when they asked about her date? How would she explain showing up alone to her ex's wedding like some pathetic cautionary tale? Her phone buzzed. Sarah's name flashed across the screen. "Please tell me you found someone to take to this disaster." Her best friend's voice crackled through the speaker as Lydia pressed the phone to her ear. "I'm working on it," Lydia lied, moving forward in line. The barista looked at her expectantly, but she held up one finger, still focused on the call. "Lydia Marie Henderson, do not tell me you're planning to go alone." "I might not go at all." "Oh, you're going. We both know you're going. You need closure, and you need to walk into that wedding looking like the goddess you are, with someone devastatingly handsome on your arm." Lydia closed her eyes. "Sarah, I don't have devastatingly handsome men just lying around. I'm a librarian who spends her evenings reading romance novels and eating cereal for dinner. Where exactly am I supposed to find Prince Charming in 4 days? Dating apps? That co-worker who's always flirting with you? Your neighbour? My co-worker is married, and my neighbour is 67 and smells like mothballs." "Then hire someone." "Hire someone?" Lydia's voice pitched higher. "I'm not hiring an escort to my ex's wedding." "Not an escort, like an actor or a friend of a friend? Someone who can pretend to be madly in love with you for one evening." The word pretend hit something soft and sore in Lydia's chest. Everything with Marcus had felt like pretending toward the end, pretending his criticism was helpful, pretending she didn't notice how he looked at other women, pretending she was enough. "Ma'am." The barista was staring at her now, and the line behind her was growing restless. "I have to go," she whispered into the phone. "Large coffee, black, please," she told the teenager behind the counter, then stepped back to the phone. "Sarah, I just need to accept that I'm going alone, okay? I'll hold my head high, smile through the ceremony, and leave early." "You will not go alone to watch Marcus marry that blonde nightmare. I forbid it." "You can't forbid it. I'm a grown woman, and if I want to humiliate myself publicly, that's my choice." She ended the call and shoved the phone into her purse with more force than necessary. The crumpled invitation crinkled against her knuckles, and she winced. "Rough conversation?" The voice was low, warm, with an edge of something that made her skin prickle with awareness. Lydia looked up to find herself staring into the most devastating pair of amber eyes she'd ever seen. The man stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that made her think of pine forests and dangerous things. He was tall, probably 6'4", with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, and sharp features that belonged on magazine covers. But it was his eyes that caught her. They seemed to see everything, and right now they were focused entirely on her, with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop." His smile was slight, almost predatory, but somehow it didn't frighten her. "It's just that you look like you could use a solution to your problem." Heat flooded her cheeks. How much had he heard? "I don't know what you mean." "Wedding date," he said simply. 4 days, ex-boyfriend marrying someone else. You need someone devastatingly handsome who can pretend to be madly in love with you." Lydia's coffee cup slipped in her hands, and she barely caught it before it hit the floor. "You were listening to my entire conversation? Hard not to when you're talking loud enough for the whole coffee shop to hear." His smile widened, and she noticed he had perfect teeth. Of course he did. "But I wasn't judging, I was admiring." "Admiring what exactly?" "Your loyalty. Your friend obviously cares about you, and you're trying to protect her from worrying about you. That's rare." Something in his voice made her study his face more carefully. There was an old pain there, buried deep but still visible if you knew how to look. "You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but I'd like to." The coffee shop seemed to have gone quiet around them, though Lydia was sure that was impossible. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, and something else. A strange humming sensation in her chest, like a guitar string being plucked. "I could help you," he said, and his voice had dropped to something almost intimate. "With your problem." "You want to be my fake wedding date?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended, defensive. "Why would you possibly want to do that?" "Maybe I have my reasons." He stepped closer, and the humming in her chest intensified. "Maybe I think your ex is an idiot for letting you go." "You don't even know what he let go." The man's expression shifted, became almost fierce. "I know enough." They stared at each other for a long moment, and Lydia felt something impossible happening. This stranger, this devastatingly handsome man who looked like he'd stepped out of one of her romance novels, was offering to solve her problem. It was too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "What's the catch?" she asked. "No catch." "There's always a catch. Are you looking for money? A favour? What do you get out of pretending to be my boyfriend for an evening?" His smile returned, slow and dangerous. "Who said anything about pretending to be your boyfriend?" Lydia's breath caught. "What? You said you needed someone devastatingly handsome who could pretend to be madly in love with you. I'm offering to be your husband." The coffee cup did slip this time, but somehow his hand was there to catch it before it could fall. His fingers brushed hers, and the touch sent electricity shooting up her arm. "My husband?" "For the evening," he clarified, though something in his eyes suggested he might mean something else entirely. "Walk into that wedding wearing my ring. Let me show everyone exactly how precious you are. Let me make sure your ex spends his wedding night regretting every moment he had you and lost you." Lydia's rational mind was screaming at her to walk away. This was insane. He was a stranger, possibly dangerous, definitely too good to be true. Men like him didn't offer to help women like her. Men like him didn't notice women like her. But the humming in her chest had become a warm, golden pull, and when she looked into his amber eyes, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Safe, protected, chosen. "I don't even know your name," she whispered. "Damien," he said, "and you're Lydia." "How did you—" "Your friend said it on the phone." He was still holding her coffee cup, still close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "So, Lydia, will you let me be your husband for an evening?" Every rational thought in her head was telling her to say no. This was how horror movies started. This was how women ended up missing. Instead, she heard herself say, "Yes." His smile could have powered the entire city. "Good. Meet me tomorrow at 7. Chez Laurent on 5th Street. We have details to discuss." "Chez Laurent?" Lydia's voice squeaked. "That place is impossible to get into." "Not if you know the right people." He handed her coffee cup back, and his fingers lingered against hers for just a moment too long. "Wear something nice, but not too nice. Save the stunning for the wedding." He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at her. "Oh, and Lydia?" "Yes?" "Your ex is going to spend the rest of his life knowing he had everything and threw it away." Then he was gone, moving through the coffee shop with the fluid grace of a predator, leaving Lydia standing there with her heart hammering and her skin still tingling from his touch. She didn't know his last name. She didn't know what he did for a living, or why he'd offered to help her, or how he'd managed to make her feel like the most important person in the room with just a look. But tomorrow night She was going to find out. Lydia had never been inside Chez Laurent, but she'd walked past it enough times to know it was the kind of restaurant where reservations were made months in advance and the waitstaff probably earned more than she did. Standing outside its gleaming glass doors at exactly 7 o'clock, she felt like an imposter in her best dress, a simple black number she'd bought for her college graduation 3 years ago. The maitre d' took one look at her, and his expression suggested she'd wandered in from the street by mistake. "Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting someone. Damien." She realised she still didn't know his last name, which made her feel even more foolish. "Ah, Mr. Cross. Right this way, miss." The name hit her like a physical blow. Cross. As in Cross Industries, the massive corporation that owned half the city. As in Damien Cross, the reclusive billionaire CEO, whose face occasionally graced the business section of newspapers. As in the man who was rumoured to be something far more dangerous than just wealthy. Her feet felt like lead as she followed the maitre d' through the restaurant. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in pristine white linen, where couples spoke in hushed tones over wine that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She didn't belong here. She didn't belong anywhere near a man like Damien Cross. He was waiting at a corner table, and when he looked up and smiled, her breath caught all over again. He'd traded yesterday's casual clothes for a perfectly tailored black suit that made him look even more devastatingly handsome, if that was possible. But it was his eyes that made her pause. They held the same intensity as before, the same focused attention that made her feel like the only person in the room. Lydia. He stood as she approached, pulling out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy. "You look beautiful." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. The black dress was nothing special, but the way he was looking at her made her feel like she was wearing couture. "You're Damien Cross." Guilty. He settled back into his seat, and she noticed he'd already ordered wine, something that looked expensive and French. "I take it you've heard of me." "Everyone's heard of you." She accepted the glass he poured for her, though her hands were trembling slightly. "You own half the city?" "3/4, actually, but who's counting?" The casual way he said it made her stomach flip. "Why didn't you tell me yesterday?" "Would you have said yes if you'd known?" Lydia considered this. Probably not. Definitely not. Men like Damien Cross didn't help random women with their ex-boyfriend problems unless they wanted something in return, and she couldn't imagine what she possibly had to offer him. "No," she admitted, "that's why I didn't tell you." He leaned forward, his amber eyes serious. "I want you to know something, Lydia. What I offered yesterday, it wasn't charity. It wasn't some rich man's whim." "Then what was it?" For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across his features. "Have you ever lost someone you thought you couldn't live without?" The question caught her off guard. "My parents. Car accident when I was 19. "I'm sorry." His voice was gentle, and she could tell he meant it. "For me, it was my mate, my wife. She died 2 years after we married." Mate. The word sent a strange shiver through her. She'd heard it used before, but usually only in the context of the supernatural romance novels she devoured in her spare time. "I'm sorry too. It's been 8 years. 8 years of well-meaning friends trying to set me up, of women who want my money or my power, of feeling like I was just going through the motions of living." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "Then yesterday I heard you talking about needing someone to pretend to love you, and I thought, here's someone who understands what it feels like to be alone." His touch sent warmth shooting up her arm, settling in her chest like a small sun. "But you're not alone. You could have anyone you wanted." "Could I?" His thumb traced across her knuckles, and the simple touch made her breath catch. "Money doesn't buy connection. Lydia, power doesn't buy understanding. I've spent 8 years surrounded by people and feeling completely isolated." "So this is what? Mutual loneliness?" "This is 2 people who could help each other. His grip on her hand tightened slightly. "You need someone to show your ex what he lost. I need someone who sees me as just a man instead of a bank account." The server appeared to take their order, and Lydia realised she hadn't even looked at the menu. Damien ordered for both of them without consulting her, which should have annoyed her, but somehow felt protective instead. He'd noticed her overwhelmed expression and taken the decision away from her. "Tell me about the wedding," he said when they were alone again. "Who is this ex of yours, and why does he deserve to suffer?" "You don't know that he deserves to suffer. Maybe I was a terrible girlfriend." Damien's expression went sharp, almost predatory. "Were you?" No, I don't think so. I tried to be what he wanted, but it was never enough." The words came out quieter than she'd intended. "He said I was too quiet, too boring, that I didn't have enough ambition." "What do you do for work?" "I'm a children's librarian at the downtown branch." "You spend your days helping kids discover the magic of reading, and he called you boring?" Damien's voice had gone dangerously soft. "What's his name?" "Marcus Webb. He's a lawyer at Hartman and Associates." "I know the firm." Something in Damien's tone suggested this wasn't a good thing for Marcus. "And the woman he's marrying?" "Bethany Summers. She's a pharmaceutical sales rep, blonde, ambitious, everything I'm not." Lydia took a sip of wine, trying to wash away the bitter taste of those words. "They met at some corporate networking event 6 months before Marcus broke up with me. He said they just clicked." "How long were you together?" 3 years. The admission felt heavy. I thought he was going to propose. He kept talking about our future, about how I just needed to work on myself a little more, and then we'd be perfect together." Damien was very still, his amber eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Work on yourself how?" "Lose weight, be more social, dress better, have opinions about things that mattered." She laughed, but it came out shaky. "I kept a list of conversation topics in my purse so I wouldn't embarrass him at parties." The silence that followed was so complete she could hear the gentle clink of silverware from other tables. When Damien spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Where is this list now?" "I threw it away after he told me about Bethany." She met his eyes. "You probably think I'm pathetic." "I think," Damien said slowly, "that Marcus Webb is about to learn what regret feels like." Their food arrived, something that looked like art on a plate and tasted even better. Damien kept the conversation flowing easily, asking about her work, her favourite books, her dreams. He listened to every answer like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard, and slowly Lydia felt herself relaxing. "The wedding is at the Grand View Hotel," she said as they shared dessert. "Saturday evening, black tie." "I know the place. I'll have a dress sent to you." Lydia nearly choked on her wine. "You'll what?" "You'll need something appropriate for the occasion, something that makes it impossible for anyone to look at anything else." "I can't let you buy me a dress." "Why not?" "Because that's what sugar daddies do." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and her face flamed with embarrassment. Damien's laugh was rich and warm. "Lydia, I'm offering to be your husband for an evening. Buying you a wedding-appropriate dress is the least I can do." "But why? This isn't a real relationship. After Saturday, we'll probably never see each other again." Something shifted in his expression, became almost cautious. "Is that what you want?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities she wasn't ready to examine. "I don't know what I want." "That's honest." He signalled for the check. "Can I show you something?" 20 minutes later, they were in the back of his private car, a sleek black sedan with leather seats that probably cost more than her entire apartment, driving through the hills above the city. Lydia should have been nervous about getting into a car with a man she barely knew, but the golden warmth in her chest had only grown stronger throughout dinner. "Where are we going?" "My house. I want to show you something." His house turned out to be a sprawling modern mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. He led her through rooms that belonged in architectural magazines, but she barely saw them. All her attention was focused on the way he moved, the way he kept checking to make sure she was comfortable, the way her skin tingled every time he accidentally brushed against her. They ended up on a balcony that offered a breathtaking view of the city lights spread out below like scattered diamonds. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's empty," Damien said quietly. "I've lived here for 5 years, and it's never felt like home." She turned to look at him. In the moonlight, his features looked even sharper, more dangerous, but his eyes held a loneliness that matched the ache in her own chest. "Why did you really ask me to dinner?" she asked. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because when I saw you in that coffee shop, struggling with something that should have been simple, fighting to keep your dignity even when you felt like you were falling apart, you reminded me what courage looks like. I wasn't being brave, I was being desperate. Sometimes they're the same thing." He moved closer, and she could smell his cologne again, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I want to help you, Lydia, but I need you to understand this won't be pretending, not for me." "What do you mean?" "I mean that when I walk into that wedding with you on my arm, when I introduce you as my wife, when I look at you like you're the most precious thing in my world, that won't be acting." Her breath caught. "Damien, I know it's fast, I know it doesn't make sense, but something happened when I saw you yesterday, and it's been growing stronger every minute we spend together." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing across her cheekbone. "Tell me you feel it too." She did. The golden warmth, the sense of rightness, the feeling that she could trust this man with anything. It was impossible and terrifying and completely against everything rational. "I feel it," she whispered. His smile was devastating. "Good, because I'm going to make sure that Saturday night is the beginning of something, not the end." He leaned down, and for a moment she thought he was going to kiss her. Instead, he pressed his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her lips. "But only if that's what you want. No pressure, no expectations, just possibility." Standing there in the moonlight with the city spread out below them, and the most beautiful man she'd ever met holding her like she was made of spun glass, Lydia felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. "I want the possibility," she said, and when he finally did kiss her, soft and gentle and full of promise, she felt the last of her walls begin to crumble. The next morning, Lydia woke up in a bedroom that belonged in a luxury magazine. Silk sheets, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view that made her breath catch all over again. For a moment she panicked. Had she slept with him? But no. She was still wearing the simple pyjamas Damien had provided after she'd agreed to stay the night rather than drive home late. After she'd kissed him on the balcony, he'd been the perfect gentleman. Showed her to the guest room, made sure she had everything she needed, and wished her good night with another one of those devastating smiles that made her knees weak. Now, padding barefoot across marble floors toward the sound of voices, she found him in a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a 5-star restaurant. He was fully dressed in dark jeans and a grey sweater that clung to his shoulders in all the right ways, speaking quietly to a woman in her 50s who was arranging fresh flowers in a crystal vase. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty," Damien said when he saw her, and the warmth in his voice made her stomach flutter. "Maria, this is Lydia. Lydia, meet Maria. She runs this house and keeps me from living entirely on takeout." Maria beamed at her. "Miss Lydia, Mr. Cross has told me so much about you. You sit, I make you breakfast." "Oh, you don't have to—" "She has to," Damien interrupted, pulling out a chair at the breakfast bar. "Maria's feelings get hurt if you don't let her feed you. Trust me on this." 20 minutes later, Lydia was working her way through the best omelette of her life, while Damien watched her eat with an expression of quiet satisfaction. It should have been awkward. She barely knew this man, and here she was eating breakfast in his house like they'd been together for years. Instead, It felt strangely natural. "What's the plan for today?" she asked, accepting the coffee Maria placed in front of her. "Today we practice being married." The words made her choke slightly on her coffee. Practice? If we're going to convince everyone at that wedding that we're madly in love, we need to look comfortable together. Right now you flinch every time I touch you. I don't flinch. To prove his point, Damien reached across the breakfast bar and took her hand. She jumped slightly, then flushed when she realized he was right. "It's not you," she said quickly. "It's just Marcus used to criticize the way I reacted to affection, said I was too tense, too awkward." Something dangerous flashed in Damien's amber eyes. Marcus was an idiot. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. His thumb traced across her knuckles, and this time she managed not to jump. "There's nothing wrong with the way you respond to touch, Lydia. The problem was that it wasn't the right touch." Heat pooled low in her stomach at his words, at the way his voice had dropped to something almost intimate. "How do you know?" "Because I can feel how you respond to me." It was true. When he touched her, her skin came alive. When he looked at her with those intense amber eyes, she felt like the most beautiful woman in the world. When he smiled, really smiled, not the polite expression he probably used in business meetings, she felt something in her chest unfurl, like a flower opening to sunlight. "Come on," he said, standing and offering her his hand. "Let's practice." They spent the morning in his living room, which was larger than her entire apartment. He taught her how to stand beside him at social events, close enough that his claim was obvious, but not so close that she'd feel crowded. How to accept his arm when he offered it, how to let him guide her through a crowd with his hand on the small of her back. Each touch was carefully controlled, respectful, but it sent heat racing through her veins anyway. By the time they broke for lunch, Lydia felt like her skin was humming with electricity. "You're getting better," Damien said, as they shared sandwiches on his back terrace. "But you still look surprised every time I touch you." "I'm not used to it." "What do you mean?" Lydia set down her sandwich, suddenly self-conscious. Marcus wasn't very physically affectionate. He said public displays of affection were immature. And in private. The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Lydia felt heat climb her neck. He was very focused on efficiency. Damien went very still. Efficiency. He had a lot of demands on his time, between work and his social obligations. She trailed off, realizing how pathetic it sounded. Lydia. Damien's voice was carefully controlled. "When you were together, did he make you feel desired?" The question hit something soft and wounded inside her chest. "I don't think I'm the kind of woman who inspires desire." The sound Damien made was somewhere between a growl and a curse. Before she could react, he was standing, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair. His hands framed her face, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice intense. "You are extraordinary. You are the kind of woman who stops traffic, the kind of woman men write poetry about, the kind of woman who deserves to be worshipped." "Damien, I spent 5 minutes with you in a coffee shop, and I haven't been able to think about anything else since. You think that's normal? You think I go around offering to be fake husbands to random women?" Her breath was coming in short gasps. "Then why are you helping me?" "Because the moment I saw you, something in my chest recognized something in yours. Because you're brave and kind and beautiful, and any man who couldn't see that doesn't deserve you." His thumbs traced across her cheekbones. "Because I think we could be something incredible together if you're willing to take the chance." Before she could lose her nerve, Lydia leaned forward and kissed him. It was supposed to be soft, experimental, but the moment their lips met, something ignited. His arms came around her, pulling her closer, and she melted into him like she'd been made to fit against his body. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "We should probably practice that too," she whispered against his lips. His laugh was rough with desire. "If you insist." They were interrupted by the sound of Lydia's phone ringing. She glanced at the screen and her stomach dropped. "It's Marcus." Damien's expression went cold. "Answer it." "What?" "Put it on speaker. Let me hear what this bastard has to say." With shaking hands, Lydia accepted the call and put it on speakerphone. "Lydia, I was hoping to catch you." Marcus's voice filled the terrace, bright and false. "Bethany and I wanted to call and make sure you're still planning to come Saturday. We know it might be awkward for you, being there without a date and all." Damien's eyes flashed with something that looked almost predatory. He gestured for her to respond. "Actually, I'll be bringing my husband," Lydia said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Silence. Then, "Your what?" "My husband. We just got married last weekend. Very intimate ceremony." "You got married?" Marcus's voice pitched higher. "To who?" Damien leaned closer to the phone. "Damien Cross, and you must be the ex-boyfriend I've heard so much about." Another silence, longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had gone tight with disbelief. "Damien Cross, as in Cross Industries?" "That's right." "Bullshit." The word came out sharp and ugly. "There's no way Lydia landed someone like you. What is this, some kind of escort situation?" The change in Damien was instantaneous and terrifying. His entire body went rigid, his eyes burning with rage that made the air around them feel dangerous. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "I'm sorry, I don't think I heard you correctly. Did you just suggest that my wife is a prostitute?" No, I just meant—" "You meant what exactly? That a woman as beautiful and intelligent as Lydia couldn't possibly attract a successful man? That there must be money changing hands for someone to want her?" "Look, I didn't mean anything by it. I'm just surprised." "You're surprised because you're an idiot who never recognized what he had." Damien's voice cut through Marcus's stammering like a blade. "But don't worry, your loss is my gain." He ended the call and immediately pulled Lydia into his arms. She was shaking, whether from Marcus's cruelty or from witnessing Damien's protective fury. She wasn't sure. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his chest. "I should have known he'd say something horrible." "You have nothing to apologize for." His arms tightened around her. "But he does." "Damien, please don't do anything to hurt his business. I know you could probably—" "I'm not going to hurt his business," Damien said, his voice still carrying an edge of danger. "I'm going to do something much more effective. I'm going to show up at that wedding and make it crystal clear what he threw away." That evening they had dinner on the terrace as the sun set over the city. Maria had outdone herself with some kind of pasta dish that melted in Lydia's mouth, paired with wine that probably cost more than her car. "I should probably go home tonight," Lydia said as they shared tiramisu. "I have work tomorrow and I need to get my dress ready for Saturday." "About that?" Damien's smile was almost shy, which looked strange on his devastatingly handsome features. "I may have taken the liberty of having something delivered to your apartment." "Damien, I told you, I know what you told me, but this isn't about money or sugar daddies or anything like that. This is about making sure the woman I'm proud to call my wife looks as stunning as she deserves to look." The word wife sent a warm shiver through her. "It's not real, remember?" "Isn't it?" He reached across the table and took her hand. "Because sitting here with you, watching you laugh at Maria's stories, seeing the way you light up when you talk about the kids at the library, this feels more real than anything I've experienced in 8 years. Lydia's heart hammered against her ribs. "Damien." "I know I'm pushing too fast. I know this is crazy. But I also know that what we have is special, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just because it scares me." "It scares you?" "Terrifies me," he admitted. "I thought I was done feeling this way. Thought I'd had my one chance at love and lost it. Then you walked into that coffee shop and turned my world upside down." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked across the table, watching the city lights twinkle to life below them. Finally, Lydia squeezed his fingers. "The wedding is in 3 days." "I know." "After that, we'll have to figure out what this is, what we want it to be." His smile was soft and full of promise. "I already know what I want it to be, Lydia. The question is whether you're brave enough to want the same thing." As his driver took her home later that night, Lydia pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his goodbye kiss. In 3 days she would walk into her ex-boyfriend's wedding on the arm of the most powerful man in the city. But more importantly, in 3 days she would have to decide if she was ready to trust again, ready to believe that she could be everything to someone who mattered, ready to let herself fall completely in love with Damien Cross. Saturday arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made everything feel sharp and hyper-real. Lydia stood in front of her bedroom mirror, hardly recognizing the woman staring back at her. The dress Damien had sent was a masterpiece, midnight blue silk that seemed to shift and shimmer with every breath, cut to hug her curves in ways that made her look like a completely different person. The neckline was elegant without being scandalous, the hemline hit just at her knees, and somehow it made her look taller, more confident, more beautiful than she'd ever felt in her life. The jewellery that had arrived with it was even more stunning. Sapphire earrings that caught the light like captured starfire, and a matching necklace that felt substantial against her throat. She didn't want to think about how much any of it cost. Her phone buzzed with a text from Damien. "On my way up. You ready to show them what they lost?" Her reflection smiled back at her, and for the first time in months, Lydia actually believed she might be. The knock on her door came exactly when he'd promised. She opened it to find Damien in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped off a red carpet. But it was the expression on his face when he saw her that made her breath catch. Wonder and desire and something deeper, something that looked almost possessive. "Christ, Lydia." His voice was rough. "You're going to stop traffic." "The dress is beautiful, thank you." "The dress is just fabric. You're the one who's beautiful." He stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Are you ready for this?" "I think so." "Remember, tonight you're not Marcus's cast-off ex-girlfriend. You're my wife, my choice, my everything." His thumb traced across her cheekbone. "Can you remember that?" "I'll try." "Good, because I meant what I said. This isn't pretending for me." The drive to the Grandview Hotel passed in a blur of city lights and quiet conversation. Damien kept one hand on hers the entire time, his thumb tracing soothing circles across her knuckles whenever he felt her tension spike. By the time they pulled up to the hotel's circular drive, Lydia felt almost calm, until she saw the crowd of people milling around the entrance in their formal wear, and reality hit her like a physical blow. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Yes, you can." Damien's voice was steady, confident. "But we don't have to go in if you don't want to. Say the word and we'll drive away right now." She looked at him, this devastating man who had turned her world upside down in less than a week, who was offering to give up an evening of making her ex-boyfriend suffer just to keep her comfortable. "No," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I want to do this." His smile could have powered the entire hotel. "That's my girl." The valet opened her door, and Damien was there immediately, offering his arm with the kind of old-fashioned courtesy that made her feel precious. The moment they stepped out of the car, she could feel eyes turning their way. Whispers started almost immediately. "Is that Damien Cross? Who's the woman with him?" "She's gorgeous. Who is she?" Damien leaned down to whisper in her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "They're staring because you're the most beautiful woman here." The hotel lobby was decorated with white roses and gold accents, elegant and expensive in the way that screamed Marcus's new fiancée's taste. A string quartet played soft classical music while guests milled around with champagne glasses, everyone dressed to the nines and speaking in the hushed tones reserved for important events. Lydia spotted Marcus almost immediately. He stood near the reception desk in his rented tuxedo, his arm around a tall blonde woman in a dress that probably cost more than Lydia's monthly salary. Bethany, his new fiancée, his upgrade, his everything Lydia wasn't. Marcus saw them at exactly the same moment. His eyes widened as he took in Damien first, then shifted to Lydia, and his mouth literally fell open. "Show time," Damien murmured, his hand settling possessively on the small of her back. They made their way through the crowd, and Lydia was amazed at how easily people parted before them. Damien's presence commanded attention without him having to say a word, and with his hand on her back she felt like she was wrapped in his power and protection. "Lydia!" Marcus detached himself from Bethany and approached them, his smile too bright and his eyes calculating. "You made it, and this must be your husband?" "Damien Cross," Damien said, extending his hand. His smile was perfectly polite and absolutely lethal. "Congratulations on your wedding." Marcus shook his hand, and Lydia noticed the slight wince that suggested Damien's grip was firmer than necessary. "I have to say, when Lydia mentioned she'd gotten married, I was surprised." "I imagine you were." Damien's arm came around Lydia's waist, pulling her closer against his side. "After all, you knew her for 3 years and apparently never realized what a treasure you had." Bethany appeared at Marcus's elbow, her smile sharp and assessing. "Lydia, you look different." "Marriage suits her," Damien said, before Lydia could respond. His voice carried a warmth that made the words sound like an endearment. "Though she's always been beautiful, some people just need the right person to help them see it." The barb hit its target. Marcus's face flushed slightly, and Bethany's smile became even more forced. "Well, we should probably—" Marcus started. "Lydia!" The voice cut through the crowd like a blade, and Lydia's stomach dropped. Her sister Jennifer was bearing down on them, her face bright with malicious curiosity. "I heard you were coming with someone, but I had to see it to believe it." Jennifer had always been the pretty sister, the successful one, the one who never missed an opportunity to remind Lydia of her shortcomings. Now she stood there in her designer dress with her perfect hair, looking Lydia up and down like she was searching for cracks in a facade. "Jenny," Lydia managed, "this is my husband Damien." "Husband?" Jennifer's laugh was like broken glass. "Really? How sudden? When did this happen?" "Last weekend," Lydia said, grateful her voice stayed steady. "How romantic, a whirlwind courtship." Jennifer's eyes shifted to Damien, clearly trying to figure out what he was getting out of this arrangement. "I'm Jennifer, Lydia's sister. We're all just so surprised about this marriage. Lydia's never been the type to inspire grand gestures." The words hit exactly where they were meant to, that soft, wounded place where Lydia kept all her insecurities about not being good enough, pretty enough, worthy enough. The change in Damien was subtle, but unmistakable. His arm tightened around her waist, and when he spoke, his voice carried a dangerous edge that made Jennifer take an involuntary step backward. "I'm sorry, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, his tone perfectly polite and absolutely glacial. "You seem to think I married Lydia as some kind of favour to her. Let me clarify, I'm the one who got lucky here." Jennifer's smile faltered. "You see, I spent 8 years thinking I'd never find anyone who could make me feel alive again. Then I met your sister, and she turned my entire world upside down." His hand came up to cup Lydia's face, his thumb tracing across her cheekbone with infinite tenderness. "She's brilliant and kind and brave, and every day I wake up grateful that she chose me." The words hit Lydia like a physical blow. The way he said them, the absolute conviction in his voice, the way he was looking at her like she was the centre of his universe. It didn't feel like acting. "As for grand gestures," Damien continued, never taking his eyes off Lydia's face, "your sister inspires them constantly. She just never had anyone worthy of making them before." The crowd around them had gone quiet, drawn by the intensity in his voice. Jennifer stood there, with her mouth opening and closing like a fish, clearly struggling to find a response that wouldn't make her look petty. "That's very sweet," she finally managed. "It's not sweet," Damien said, finally turning his attention back to her. It's the truth, and frankly, I'm surprised her own family doesn't see what I see when they look at her." The rebuke was delivered so gently that it took Jennifer a moment to realize she'd been devastated. When it hit her, her face went white, then red. "I think I need some air," Lydia whispered. Without a word, Damien guided her through the crowd toward the hotel's garden terrace. People stepped aside for them automatically, and Lydia was dimly aware of the whispers starting up in their wake. The terrace was mostly empty, strung with fairy lights that cast a warm glow over the carefully manicured gardens. Damien led her to a quiet corner where they could be alone, then turned her to face him. "Talk to me." "I'm fine." "No, you're not. You're shaking." She was. She hadn't even realized it, but her hands were trembling and her breath was coming in short, sharp gasps. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I thought I could, but I can't. They all know this isn't real. They can see right through us." "Lydia, my own sister thinks you must be getting something out of this arrangement. Some kind of payment or favour or—" "Stop." His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. What your sister thinks, what any of them think, doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what we know." "Which is what?" "That this is real. That what I feel for you is real." His voice was fierce, urgent. "I told you, I'm not pretending tonight. Every word I said in there was the truth." "But we've known each other less than a week." "So what? You think there's a timeline for this, a schedule we're supposed to follow?" His thumbs traced across her cheekbones. "I know what I feel, Lydia. I know that you make me want to be better than I am. I know that when I look at you, I see my future. I know that I'd rather have 1 week with you than a lifetime with anyone else." Tears were threatening now, hot and overwhelming. "Damien, I love you," he said simply. "I know it's fast and I know it's crazy, but I love you. And if you let me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you're worth everything." The words hung between them, heavy with promise and possibility. Lydia felt something break open in her chest. All the walls she'd built around her heart, all the defences Marcus had taught her she needed. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Good. I'm terrified, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." From inside the hotel she could hear the sound of music starting. The wedding ceremony was beginning. In a few minutes she would have to go back in there and watch Marcus marry someone else. But standing here in Damien's arms, feeling the absolute certainty in his voice, she realized something. She didn't care about Marcus anymore. She hadn't for days. All she cared about was the man holding her like she was precious, looking at her like she was everything he'd ever wanted. "I love you too," she whispered. His smile was brilliant, transformative. "Say it again." "I love you, Damien Cross." When he kissed her this time, it was different from all the others. Deeper, more claiming, full of promises and future and forever. She melted into him completely, letting him support her weight as the last of her defences crumbled. They were interrupted by the sound of someone clearing their throat. They broke apart to find Marcus standing at the edge of the terrace, his face tight with something that might have been regret. "The ceremony's about to start," he said stiffly. Damien's arm came around Lydia's waist, holding her steady. "We'll be right in." Marcus hesitated, then looked directly at Lydia. "You look happy." "I am." "Good. That's good." He turned to go, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you found someone who sees what I was too stupid to see." Then he was gone, leaving them alone under the fairy lights with the sound of wedding music drifting from inside. "Ready to go watch your ex get married?" Damien asked. Lydia looked up at him. This man who had appeared in her life like magic and turned everything upside down, who loved her enough to fight for her, who made her feel like the heroine of her own story. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." Because this time she wasn't going alone. The wedding ceremony was everything Bethany had probably dreamed of. White roses cascading from every surface, golden candlelight flickering in crystal holders, and a string quartet playing soft romantic melodies as guests took their seats. Lydia and Damien slipped into a row near the back, his hand finding hers immediately and holding tight. She should have felt awkward watching her ex-boyfriend marry another woman. Instead, she felt strangely detached, like she was watching a movie about someone else's life. The man standing at the altar in his rented tuxedo looked smaller somehow, less significant than he had in her memories. When Bethany appeared at the back of the aisle in her elaborate white gown, Marcus's face lit up with the kind of joy Lydia realized he'd never shown when looking at her. "Good," Damien whispered in her ear. "He looks happy. That means when I destroy him in a few minutes, it'll hurt more." "You're not going to destroy anyone." His smile was pure predator. "We'll see." The ceremony proceeded normally until the minister reached the traditional moment. "If anyone has a reason these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace." The silence that followed was supposed to be brief and ceremonial. Instead, it stretched on, thick with tension, until finally someone in the front row stood up. It was Marcus's mother, her face pale but determined. "I'm sorry, but I have to say something." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Marcus went white. "Mum, what are you doing?" "I'm stopping you from making the biggest mistake of your life." "Mrs." Webb's voice carried clearly through the chapel. "I watched you throw away the best thing that ever happened to you, and I've kept my mouth shut for months, but I can't watch you do this knowing what I know." "Mum, sit down, please." "That girl loved you with everything she had," Mrs. Webb continued, her voice breaking slightly. "She put up with your criticism, your demands, your constant need to change her into someone she wasn't. And for what? So you could marry someone who doesn't even know your middle name?" What?" Bethany's voice was sharp with confusion. "Ask her," Mrs. Webb challenged, looking directly at her son. "Ask her what your middle name is. Ask her what your favourite book was as a child. Ask her what you're afraid of in the dark." Marcus's face had gone from white to red. "This isn't appropriate." "James," a quiet voice said from the back of the chapel. "Your middle name is James after your grandfather. Your favourite book was Where the Wild Things Are because you used to have nightmares and it made you feel brave. And you're afraid of thunderstorms because you got caught in one when you were 7 and thought the world was ending." Every head turned toward the source of the voice. Lydia sat perfectly still, her hand still clasped in Damien's, her face calm and sad. She hadn't meant to speak, but the words had come out anyway. "She knows you better than I do," Bethany said in a small voice. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stood frozen at the altar, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't find words. Bethany stared at him with growing horror, clearly realizing the implications of what had just happened. "You're still in love with her," Bethany whispered. No, that's not." Marcus's voice cracked. "Bethany, please." "You are. You're marrying me, but you're still in love with her." "That's enough." The voice that cut through the chaos was Damien's, low and commanding and absolutely lethal. He stood slowly, his presence immediately commanding the attention of everyone in the chapel. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of authority that made people obey without question. "I think there's been enough damage done here," he said, his amber eyes fixed on Marcus. "Your mother is right. You did throw away the best thing that ever happened to you, but what she's wrong about is thinking you deserve another chance." He stepped into the aisle, pulling Lydia with him, and suddenly they were the centre of attention in a way that felt completely different from before. This wasn't curiosity or gossip. This was witnessing something powerful and real. "You see, Marcus," Damien continued, his voice carrying easily through the chapel, "the woman you discarded, the one you criticised and diminished and tried to change into someone acceptable to you, is extraordinary. She's brilliant and kind and brave, and she deserves to be loved exactly as she is." "Damien," Lydia whispered, but he shook his head. "No, they need to hear this." His hand tightened on hers. "For 3 years you made her believe she wasn't enough. You made her think she needed to be smaller, quieter, less herself to be worthy of love. And now you're marrying someone else while still carrying a torch for the woman you were too cowardly to fight for." Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but Damien's expression silenced him. "Here's what's going to happen," Damien said, his voice soft and dangerous. "You're going to let Bethany go find someone who actually loves her instead of settling for her. You're going to stop using women as placeholders for what you really want but are too scared to reach for. And you're going to spend the rest of your life knowing that you had everything and threw it away." He turned his attention to the crowd, his arm coming around Lydia's waist in a gesture that was both protective and claiming. "Most of you know who I am," he said, and his voice had shifted to something warmer, more intimate. "What you don't know is that 6 days ago I met the woman who changed everything. The woman standing beside me isn't just beautiful, though she takes my breath away every time I look at her. She isn't just intelligent, though she's the smartest person I've ever known. She's brave enough to love completely, generous enough to forgive the unforgivable, and strong enough to rebuild herself after someone tried to tear her down." Lydia felt tears starting, but they weren't tears of sadness or embarrassment. They were tears of recognition, of being truly seen for the first time in her life. "I love her," Damien said simply, his voice carrying to every corner of the chapel. "Not because she's perfect, but because she's perfectly herself. Not because she makes me look good, but because she makes me want to be good. Not because she needs me, but because I need her." He turned to look at her then, his amber eyes fierce with emotion. "Lydia Henderson Cross, you are everything I never knew I was looking for. You're my heart, my home, my future. And I promise you, in front of all these witnesses, that I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never doubt your worth again." Then he kissed her. It wasn't the gentle, careful kiss they'd shared on the terrace. This was claiming and promise and forever all wrapped into one devastating moment. She melted into him completely, distantly aware that the entire chapel had erupted into whispers and gasps and what sounded like scattered applause. When they broke apart, Lydia was vaguely surprised to find that the world hadn't tilted off its axis. Everything looked the same, but felt completely different. "Well," Damien said, his voice carrying just enough amusement to break the tension, "this has been lovely, but my wife and I have better places to be." He guided her toward the exit, and the crowd parted before them like a sea. As they passed Marcus, Damien paused just long enough to lean in close. "Next time you have something perfect," he said, his voice too low for anyone else to hear, "try not to break it." They made it halfway to the hotel lobby before Lydia started laughing. It started as a giggle, then built to something approaching hysteria, until she was doubled over with laughter in the middle of the elegant hallway. "I can't believe you just did that," she gasped. "Which part?" "All of it. You basically declared war on my ex-boyfriend in front of 200 people. "He deserved it. You made me sound like some kind of romantic heroine." Damien stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression completely serious. "You are a romantic heroine. You're brave and beautiful and worth fighting for, and it's about time someone told you that. In front of everyone. Especially in front of everyone." His hands came up to frame her face. "I meant every word, Lydia, every single word. Even the part about spending the rest of your life with me, because that's a pretty big promise to make after knowing someone for less than a week. Even that part." His smile was soft, tender. "Especially that part." They were interrupted by the sound of heels clicking rapidly across the marble floor. Bethany appeared around the corner, still in her wedding dress, but with her hair coming loose from its elaborate updo. "Lydia, wait!" They turned to face her, and Lydia was surprised to see that Bethany looked relieved rather than angry. "I wanted to thank you," Bethany said, slightly out of breath. "Thank me?" "For saving me from marrying a man who's in love with someone else." She glanced back toward the chapel. "I knew something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Now I know. I'm sorry your wedding was ruined." "Don't be. Better to find out now than after the divorce papers are signed." Bethany looked between them, taking in their joined hands and the way Damien was standing protectively close to Lydia. "You two are the real thing, aren't you?" "Yes," Damien said without hesitation. "We are." "Good. You deserve that." Bethany turned to go, then paused. "For what it's worth, Marcus is an idiot. You're nothing like he described you." After she left, Lydia and Damien stood in the quiet hallway, the sounds of chaos from the chapel muffled by distance and closed doors. "So," Lydia said finally, "what happens now?" "Now we go home," Damien said, pressing a kiss to her temple, "and we start figuring out what forever looks like." "Your home or mine?" "Our home, wherever that ends up being." As they walked toward the exit together, Lydia caught sight of their reflection in the hotel's mirrored walls. The woman looking back at her stood tall and confident, her hand clasped in the hand of a man who looked at her like she was the center of his universe. She looked like a woman who knew exactly how much she was worth. She looked like a woman who was loved. 3 months later, Lydia woke up in silk sheets that no longer felt foreign against her skin. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of what had become their bedroom, casting golden patterns across the marble floors. She could hear Damien in the kitchen below, talking to Maria in the easy, familiar way that meant he was making breakfast himself instead of letting her do it. The woman in the mirror looked different now, not just because of the expensive skincare products or the custom-tailored clothes that filled the walk-in closet, but because of the confidence in her shoulders, the light in her eyes, the way she moved through the world like someone who knew exactly how precious she was. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Coffee this afternoon. I need to hear all about the charity gala last night. The pictures of you and Damien are all over social media, and you look like literal royalty." Lydia smiled, typing back, "Can't do coffee, but come for dinner tonight. Maria's making her famous lasagna, and Damien wants to discuss the library expansion project with you. 3 months ago, she would have been intimidated by the idea of hosting dinner at a mansion, of discussing million-dollar charity projects over wine that cost more than her old monthly salary. Now it felt natural, like she'd grown into a life she'd never imagined could be hers. "Good morning, beautiful." She turned to find Damien leaning against the doorframe, still wearing the pyjama pants he'd slept in, and nothing else. 3 months of marriage had only made him more devastating, if that was possible. But it was the way he looked at her that stole her breath, like she was the first sunrise after a long winter, like she was everything he'd ever wanted wrapped in silk and morning light. "Good morning, husband." The words still sent a warm thrill through her. They'd made it official 2 weeks after the disaster at Marcus's wedding, a small ceremony in his garden with only Maria, Sarah, and a handful of his closest friends as witnesses. No drama, no stress, just promises and joy, and the kind of happiness that made her chest feel too small to contain it all. "I made coffee," he said, crossing to her with the fluid grace that still made her pulse stutter. "And I may have convinced Maria to make those lemon scones you love." "Bribery?" "Absolutely." His arms came around her waist, pulling her against his chest. "I want to talk to you about something, and I figured carbohydrates might make you more agreeable." "That depends on what you want to talk about." Instead of answering, he led her downstairs to the terrace where breakfast was waiting. The table was set with fresh flowers and her favourite china, and Maria had outdone herself with perfectly golden scones, fresh fruit, and coffee that smelled like heaven. "You're being suspiciously nice," Lydia said as he pulled out her chair. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything yet." His smile was mischievous as he took his seat across from her. "But I'm hoping you'll let me." "Damien Cross, what are you planning?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, setting it on the table between them. Lydia's breath caught. "We're already married," she said faintly. "I know, but we never did the engagement properly. You deserved a proposal, a ring chosen specifically for you, the whole romantic production." He opened the box to reveal the most stunning ring she'd ever seen. A sapphire the colour of midnight, surrounded by diamonds that caught the morning light like captured stars. This is me asking properly, Lydia Henderson Cross, will you marry me? Again? Tears threatened, the good kind that came with overwhelming joy. You want to have another wedding? I want to give you the wedding you dreamed of when you were a little girl. The dress, the flowers, the church full of people who love you. I want to stand at the altar and watch you walk down the aisle knowing that you're choosing me, not because you need me, but because you want me. I do want you. The words came out as a whisper. Every day, every minute, I want you. Is that a yes to the proposal? That's a yes to everything. She held out her left hand, watching as he slipped the ring onto her finger beside her simple wedding band. It fit perfectly, because of course it did. Everything with Damien fit perfectly. When did you have time to design this? I've been working on it since our first week of marriage. I wanted to get it right. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. I love you, Lydia, more every day. You've made me believe in forever again. I love you too, even when you're being ridiculously romantic. Especially when I'm being ridiculously romantic. They spent the morning planning their second wedding, laughing over Maria's increasingly elaborate suggestions and debating the merits of spring versus fall ceremonies. It felt like playing house, except this house was real, and this man was hers, and this life was actually happening. There's something else, Damien said as they shared the last scone. The library board approved the expansion project. Construction starts next month. Lydia's face lit up. The children's library expansion had been her idea, a way to give back to the community that had given her so much joy over the years. Damien had not only supported it enthusiastically, he'd donated the entire budget and helped her navigate the complex world of municipal politics. The kids are going to be so excited. A whole new section just for young adult books and those reading pods you suggested. She trailed off, noticing his expression. What? They want you to run it, the whole children's department, not just the expansion. It comes with a significant salary increase and your own staff. Damien, that's incredible. I can't believe... She stopped, studying his face more carefully. You had something to do with this, didn't you? I may have mentioned to a few board members that the most qualified candidate for the position was already working there. You can't just buy me a promotion. I didn't buy you anything. You earned it. I just made sure the right people knew about your qualifications. His expression grew serious. You've been holding yourself back for years, Lydia, taking the job you thought you deserved instead of the one you were qualified for. It's time to stop hiding. The words hit something deep and true inside her chest. He was right. She had been hiding, playing small, accepting less because she'd been taught to believe she wasn't worth more. No more hiding, she agreed. Good, because I have plans for us, Mrs. Cross. Big plans. That evening, Sarah arrived for dinner with her usual whirlwind of energy and opinions. She took one look at Lydia's new ring and let out a shriek that probably scared birds from trees 3 blocks away. You're having another wedding. I get to plan another wedding. Sarah gets very excited about weddings, Lydia explained to Damien, who was watching her best friend with fascinated amusement. I can see that. Should I be worried about my budget? Absolutely, Sarah said cheerfully. I'm thinking spring ceremony, outdoor reception, at least 200 guests. They spent dinner planning and laughing, and Lydia marvelled at how easy it all was. Damien fit into her life like a missing piece she hadn't known she'd been looking for, charming Sarah with the same patient attention he gave everyone Lydia cared about. After Sarah left, they sat on the terrace with glasses of wine, watching the city lights twinkle to life below them. Do you ever miss it? Damien asked quietly. Your old life? Lydia considered the question seriously. Did she miss her tiny apartment with its leaky faucet and thin walls? Her careful budget and second-hand furniture? The careful way she'd moved through the world, trying not to take up too much space? No, she said finally. I don't miss being afraid all the time. I don't miss believing I wasn't worth very much. I don't miss settling for less because I thought it was all I deserved. Good, because I never want you to settle for less again. What about you? Do you miss your bachelor billionaire lifestyle? His laugh was warm and rich. "You mean the part where I worked 18-hour days to avoid going home to an empty house? Where I attended charity events alone and left early because I couldn't stand making small talk with people who only saw my bank account? Where I went to bed every night wondering if this was all there was?" "When you put it like that—" "I don't miss being lonely, Lydia. I don't miss feeling like I was just going through the motions of living. I don't miss thinking I'd already had my one chance at happiness." He reached for her hand, his thumb tracing over her new ring. "You saved me from that life." "We saved each other." "We did." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Tomorrow there would be work, her new position at the library, his board meetings, the endless details of planning a second wedding. But tonight there was just this: peace and love and the absolute certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. "Lydia?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For being brave enough to say yes to coffee with a stranger, for trusting me when every instinct probably told you to run, for choosing to stay when it would have been easier to leave." His voice was soft, full of wonder. "For making me believe in forever again." She turned to face him, this man who had appeared in her life like magic and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for fighting for me when I didn't know how to fight for myself, for loving me exactly as I am." "Always," he promised, leaning in to kiss her. "I will always love you exactly as you are." Later, as they got ready for bed, Lydia caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at her stood tall and confident, wearing a silk nightgown that cost more than her old monthly rent. But it wasn't the expensive clothes or the perfect makeup that made the difference. It was the certainty in her eyes, the knowledge that she was loved completely, protected fiercely, and valued beyond measure, the understanding that she had found her person, her home, her happily ever after. She thought about the wedding invitation that had started it all, the one that had made her feel worthless and desperate enough to accept help from a stranger. She should probably send Marcus and Bethany a thank you note. If they hadn't broken her heart, she never would have been in that coffee shop, never would have been desperate enough to say yes to Damien's impossible offer, never would have found her way to this life, this love, this version of herself that she was finally proud to be. "What are you thinking about?" Damien asked, appearing behind her in the mirror. "How funny life is. How the worst thing that ever happened to me led to the best thing." "Your worst thing led you to me. My worst thing, losing my first wife, led me to you." His arms came around her waist, his chin resting on top of her head. "Maybe that's how it works. Maybe we have to break a little before we can become who we're meant to be. I like that theory. I like us." She turned in his arms, going up on her toes to kiss him softly. "I love us. Forever. Forever and always." As they settled into bed together, Lydia's phone buzzed with a notification. Without thinking, she glanced at it, then smiled. "What?" Damien asked. "Sarah posted pictures from tonight on social media. Look at this caption. When your best friend marries a literal prince and they invite you over for dinner like it's no big deal. Some people get all the luck." "You didn't get lucky," Damien said, pulling her closer. "You got brave. There's a difference." Outside their windows the city hummed with life and possibility. Somewhere out there other people were falling in love, taking chances, discovering that they were worth more than they'd ever imagined. But here, in this bed, in this life they'd built together, Lydia had everything she'd ever dreamed of, and more. She was home, she was loved, she was enough, more than enough, she was everything. And tomorrow she would wake up and choose this life, this love, this man all over again. Because that's what forever meant, not just one big yes, but 1,000 small ones, every day for the rest of their lives. Where are you listening from? I love hearing from you in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, please subscribe. It's free and it really helps me bring you more of these happily ever afters. Until next time, remember that you are worthy of a love that sees you, chooses you, and fights for you exactly as you are.